This video is to help you with Task 1 of the Middle Childhood ELA Handbook.
To go over the basics, you need to read pages 8 to 13 in your handbook. You should print or at least download a copy of your handbook. Make sure you read the specifications chart that's on page 40 in the handbook. This is going to be what tells you all of the files that you need, how many pages they should be, what kind of files they should be. So that one's really important. Make sure that you print out and look at the exemplar for your handbook that's provided as a model. Most of the handbooks have a model, so you really need to make sure that you look at this example to see really what they're looking for. And there are 5 parts to Task 1. The first one is going to be Part A, which is your context for learning information. This gives learning information about your school, about your specific class, and about the differences that make your job different than a different teaching job in a different district. Part B is going to be your lesson plans for your learning segment. This is going to be a set of 3 to 5 lesson plans. Part C is your instructional materials, or the actual materials that you use to teach those lessons. Part D is going to be your assessments. And again, that's assessments for these specific lessons. And Part E is going to be your planning commentary. This is where you're going to write all about your lesson plans and all about your assessments and explain why you're doing what you're doing. This is really important, and this is the part where they really look at what to grade. You want to be able to be reflective and show what you know on that. So we're going to go over all of those in a little bit more detail. And finally, there are 5 rubrics for this task, and these rubrics are what you're going to be graded on by the EdTPA reviewers. So you want to look at page 13 to 17 in your handbook for that. Part A of Task 1 is going to be your context for learning information. For this, you're going to have to select one class that you teach that you're going to use for your EdTPA portfolio. It needs to be at least 4 students. That is the minimum requirement set by EdTPA. You have to complete the context for learning. Again, this is what gives all of the background about your school and about what you teach and how you teach. The template is provided under Task 1 in Blackboard, so you need to write in that template. This form also provides all of the information that you need about your school and classroom, and you should submit it with no more, no less than 4 pages. You have to include the prompts. Do not delete the directions, and make sure you're using this form, but it should be 4 pages. And the information here is relative to the class that you choose. So you're not just going to be general to your school or to all of your classes, but specific to the classes that you're using for EdTPA. For Part B, you are going to be required to write a set of 3 to 5 lesson plans. So we'll take this in a few steps. For step 1, the first thing that you have to do is you have to identify a learning segment, or a set of plans, to plan, teach, and analyze. This is going to be the same set of lessons that you plan in Task 1, that you teach in Task 2, and then you're going to analyze in Task 3. And this is going to consist of 3 to 5 consecutive lesson plans that build on each other in some way. So they need to be back to back, and they need to build on each other in some way. And we'll go over that in the next step.
The second step in creating your lesson plans is to create a central focus. Your central focus is what's going to be the same across all 3 lesson plans. And you're going to get this central focus from looking at your standards and creating an objective using the ELA standards for New Jersey. Make sure to use your grade level standards, not the anchor standards for this. And your central focus needs to include 3 things. It needs to show that students can use texts to either construct meaning from, interpret, or respond to some kind of complex text. This means understanding what they read, interpreting an author's choice, or writing about a text. The second thing is they have to create a written product, either interpreting or responding to complex features of a text that are beyond your students' current level of ability. So you need to challenge and push students to be able to analyze and write about features of a text in a way that they haven't been able to do before. The third thing that you need to have your central focus do is you need to have students making interdisciplinary connections. So you need to connect what they're learning in your class to a different class or a different subject.
Your third step is going to be creating your standard, objective, and assessment for your lesson plans. Keep in mind that all of your lessons should start from the standard. The standard is what New Jersey requires you to teach, and it is what you need to look at to figure out what your kids need to learn, what your students need to learn. And then from that, you're going to create your objective. This is what you want students to be able to learn and what they're going to show you by the end of this lesson. So every objective needs to have three things to it, three parts. First is how will students show that they are practicing that skill, right? How are they going to actually show you that they can do this? The second part is going to be what criteria they need to show you to be successful, to show that they've really learned this and not that they need help. The third thing is going to be when during class are they going to show this and do this. So you need to have all three of those parts in your objective. And then finally, you're going to create your assessments from that. And your assessments have to match your objective and your standard. This needs to be the same thing. Whatever you're looking for them to learn and show by the end of the lesson, that needs to be in the assessment. So the assessment is usually during guided practice or independent practice. And this is when students will do this. You will then get the assessment, right? Either it will be oral or written, but you will then assess how they did, grade it, and give feedback to students. The feedback is really important for task 3, so you want to keep that in mind. And your assessments should have a rubric, and this should align with whatever you need from them for your objective, and it should also align with your central focus. Those should all be the same thing. Step 4 is make sure you are using the provided template for your lesson plans that is on your Blackboard course. Each lesson plan can be absolutely no more than 4 pages, so that at the end you'll have a total of 12 pages for 3 lessons. Obviously it would be more than that if you have 4 or 5 lessons, but it can be no more than 4 pages per lesson. And then step 5 is that you're going to receive one-on-one feedback from your instructor through Zoom. So be ready to arrange a Zoom meeting with your instructor to get feedback on your lessons after you've submitted them. For Part C, instructional materials, this is where you're going to select and submit key instructional materials, meaning the best of your instructional materials. You're not going to submit everything that you use during the lesson, just the best of what shows what you and your students will be doing. You only get 5 pages per lesson plan to attach instructional materials, and they need to be big enough to read. So you don't want to make just tiny little boxes. You can take screenshots, you can upload it directly if it's a Word document, that's fine. You have 15 total pages maximum, 5 pages per lesson plan. So you want to look at what you have that's best. This can include your handouts that you've created, any assignments that they're working on, slides, interactive whiteboard images. It can be things that you've created. It can also be things that you've gotten from other people, as long as you cite where you got that instruction material from. A few more things to remember for your instructional materials is that EdTPA reviewers cannot and will not click on links. So you need to show all of your materials. Even if it's online, you need to take screenshots of it. Do not include any links to things. Next, do not include the formal assessment, because this will be another part of your task 1 that you upload. That will be a separate file. 5, information must be presented in the order that it's taught, and you want to label it with lesson 1 materials, lesson 2 materials. You can be more specific than that, but make sure that you put it in order of your lessons and that you name it according to each lesson. And then finally, make sure you check the specifications page in your handbook that we gave the page number to before, for how to title the file name when you save it, and how to title each set of materials within the doc. That's going to be really important so that you don't get an incomplete. Part D is going to be your assessments. So you are going to submit blank copies of all of your written assessments or directions to any oral or performance assessments. Make sure that they're blank. The point of this is not to submit student work. The point of this is to submit the blank assessments to show them what you will be assessing. Each assessment must have a grading tool. You have to have a checklist, a rubric, something that tells what parts of your objective are being evaluated, and how they're being evaluated, so that you know whether a student is really passing or they didn't reach that level of skill enough. So it absolutely needs to be related back to your objective and your central focus. There should definitely be one modified rubric as well. This can be for struggling students, it can be for higher level students who need to be pushed farther, it can be for ELLs, for IEP students, any students with specific learning needs. It does not have to be an IEP student, but any students with specific learning needs, you're going to have either modified assessment or modified rubric to go with that. The other things you need to remember about assessments is your informal assessments must match your formal assessments in all of your lessons, right? Because the informal assessments are how you're checking all along during your lesson to make sure that students understand what they're doing and what they need to do before they do their formal assessment. So it needs to be the same task. Next, the assessments must be done in class. Homework is not appropriate for assessments ever. There is no homework for EdTPA. You cannot add homework. And lastly, just make sure you check your specification chart again to make sure that you know how to name the files and how to title each assessment within it so that they know which lesson it goes to. And then the last part of your task one is going to be your planning commentary. And this is going to be a lot of writing. So you want to make sure you set aside a lot of time to be able to work on this and to really be able to reflect on your lessons and on your assessments to explain why you're doing everything. For this, go back and reread pages 10 to 12 in your handbook, because that tells you exactly what you need in your commentary. The commentary must be 9 pages. 9 pages is the maximum, and if you don't do the maximum, then you probably really aren't writing enough to answer their questions. You have to write in the template. It shows you between the brackets, you have to write right there. And it does require citations, so all citations need to be at the end, and don't worry, they do not count towards your page count. Okay, question 3 is going to ask you for citations, and just remember that you must have at least 2 of them, and these need to be well-established research citations. This is not your colleague told you to, or a teacher pay teacher assignment, right? You want to make sure you go back and look at your other courses where you studied theory or where you looked at real research on education and use some of those sources to back up why you're teaching the way that you're teaching. How do you know that you're using best practices? And then when all of your parts to your task one are complete, you're going to go back and read the specification page again to make sure that you've met all the criteria. This one is really important because if you don't do this, and you don't match the specifications that they need, you can get an incomplete, which means your portfolio won't be scored and you'll be paying the $300 to submit all over again. So you want to make sure you follow the specifications page. You also want to look at each rubric against your work and make sure that you have at least a 3 on each. So to do this, you want to look at the rubric progression document because it tells you what exactly they're looking for in a level 3, which is the passing score for that rubric, versus a level 2, which is not passing. So you want to make sure that you look at those rubric progressions and really make sure you think that your portfolio is hitting those 3s, 4s, or 5s. And then finally, just make sure that you have everything on here. Make sure everything is complete. You can always come back and rewatch this video. So good luck.